Welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to do something a little different. We're challenging our most basic assumptions about global power. I want you to imagine the unthinkable for a second. The most powerful military on Earth goes to war against Iran and suffers a profound, totally unexpected defeat. Today we're breaking down the grounded, immediate reality of what actually happens when the world order turns upside down.
So what if America loses? To set the stage, we're looking at today's fiercely divided world, with President Donald J. Trump in the White House and President Masoud Pezeshkian leading Iran. Now, these are two nations that haven't even had formal diplomatic relations since 1980. If tomorrow's headlines suddenly announced an American military defeat in this specific context, it wouldn't just be some regional issue. It would instantly become a paralyzing global event. Because let's face it, when a superpower loses a war, every single capital on Earth is forced to stop and ask what that means for their own survival.
To understand the blast radius of this kind of outcome, we'll be covering 5 main areas. We've got the immediate global shock, domestic humiliation, a shifting Middle East, the end of deterrence, and finally, the human cost.
All right, let's jump right into part 1, the immediate global shock, focusing on that crucial first hour.
Just imagine the absolute chaos of that first hour as the news breaks. Literally minutes in, screens are glowing everywhere, and news anchors are talking a mile a minute. Within 30 minutes, stock markets start sliding. Trading algorithms react to geopolitical keywords in milliseconds, and human oil traders are just left completely frozen in place, trying to figure out how to even price this sudden massive risk. By the end of that first hour, people all over the world are frantically trying to make sense of what they're seeing. Like, is this just a temporary military setback, a political disaster, or are we watching the beginning of a much larger global collapse?
Which brings us to part 2, domestic humiliation and the echo chamber of blame. Disbelief instantly turns into an echo chamber of blame. Because in a modern democracy, finger-pointing travels way faster than actual facts. The administration would be facing intense, immediate pressure from every single direction, and Congress would be demanding answers right then and there. You'd see generals hauled before cameras, while TV pundits spend days loudly arguing over intelligence failures and military strategies they honestly just learned about that morning. Defeat becomes political fuel almost instantly. And the smoke from a fire like that, well, it could linger for years.
But right underneath all the noise from those commentators and politicians lies an emotion that's honestly much more dangerous than debate: profound national humiliation. Think about it. When a country that sees itself as the world's absolute strongest loses a war, the loss is not only military, it is deeply psychological. And psychology matters in conflict way more than people like to admit. A defeat like this totally shakes confidence in institutions, in the military, and really in the whole story a nation tells itself about who it is. Moving on to part 3, a shifting Middle East and the ripple effect. Let's take a look at the totally contrasting post-war realities here. While Washington spirals into a crisis of confidence, intense scrutiny, and political blame, the reaction over in Tehran is going to be entirely different. Iran would absolutely claim a victory, and one that goes far beyond just the symbolic. It would embolden their government, massively reinforce national unity, and they'd frame it as absolute proof that endurance and resistance actually succeed while outside pressure just fails. That message, it would travel incredibly fast, and it would fundamentally alter how governments across the region think about force and resistance.
But listen, a war in one place doesn't just stay in one place. Defeat triggers a severe economic domino effect, because our modern world depends on highly connected systems. Oil markets would react sharply right away, given the Middle East's massive role as a global energy center. That instantly shakes up shipping routes and causes insurance rates to totally spike. As a result, global fuel prices shoot up, and with supply chains disrupted, inflation just gets worse. And this isn't just some abstract economic theory. This means the price of literally everything, from your weekly groceries to your daily commute, skyrockets overnight as global businesses freeze up and panic. Economically speaking, a defeat like this is felt by everyone everywhere.
Now let's look at part 4, the end of deterrence and shattering the myth.
We all know deterrence relies heavily on the psychological projection of power, right? It's that carefully built image used to warn enemies, reassure allies, and essentially prevent adversaries from taking hostile action in the first place. But what happens if the perceived cost of challenging U.S. power suddenly drops? If rivals out there realize that projection is actually vulnerable, that entire global calculus just shatters. Diplomacy could become significantly harder, and brinkmanship could rise in some very dangerous places. Because when a giant stumbles, the global recalculation is immediate. Now, allies wouldn't just instantly abandon America, but they would definitely start hedging their bets, quietly seeking out new independent defense partnerships. Rivals, they're going to test boundaries with this newfound boldness, speaking to adversaries in ways they never would have dared to before. Meanwhile, regional powers would probably panic over the shifting balance, moving really swiftly toward extreme caution or dialogue, just to avoid getting caught in the vacuum. You see, the myth of absolute power matters more than facts in international affairs. Once that myth cracks, the whole world order permanently shifts.
Finally, we arrive at part 5, the human cost, beyond the battlefield. The reality is, war does not end when the bullets stop. It ends much, much later, if it even ends at all. Soldiers return home carrying trauma, anger, and just profound confusion. Civilians are left dealing with damaged neighborhoods and disrupted basic services. The reconstruction process is always painfully slow, and children have to grow up in the heavy shadow of events they had absolutely zero choice in. For citizens on both sides, that comforting sense that history is something distant, it completely disappears. History suddenly feels like it's walked right into your living room and sat down at your dinner table.
As our source material so powerfully reminds us, the most important part of any war story is not the hardware or the strategy. It is the people trapped inside the consequences. No chart, no graph, no geopolitical hot take on TV can ever truly capture the reality of ordinary families in both America and Iran trying to make sense of the damage. Families sleeping in uncertainty or waiting for a voice message from a loved one that might never, ever arrive.
So ultimately, what does the world learn if a superpower actually loses a war like this? Well, it learns that power is definitely not the same thing as certainty. It learns that modern conflicts are incredibly messy, hugely costly, and deeply unpredictable. We'd see that even superpowers can suffer massive psychological and political blows. It watches regional wars effortlessly shake up global alliances and markets. And honestly, most painfully, we learned that undeniable truth: history just keeps repeating. No side wins a war without leaving pieces of itself behind.
I want to leave you with this final vital question to consider today. What does the world become after the war ends? Because sometimes, the most important question isn't actually who wins or loses on the battlefield, but what the world becomes in the aftermath. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. If this changed how you view the fragility of our global order, I hope you'll keep asking these tough questions right along with us.